Hello and welcome back to the Digital Marketing Podcast. My name is Kieran Rogers.
I'm Louise Crossley.
And I'm Daniel Rolls.
And today we are talking about building custom reports in GA4.
So, the limitations of GA4, when you first go in, you're kind of like, where are all the reports? Right? Because you're so used to Universal Analytics having loads and loads of reports that we went into a standard. And then you go into GA4 and you click on that reports kind of tab, and it's like, oh, there's not that much stuff in here. I must be missing something. And then you quite quickly realize you're not missing something, and there just aren't as many reports in there. But the power of GA4 is actually in how customizable it is. I have to say, I've completely come around to GA4. I actually prefer it now to Universal Analytics, but you just need to get your head around it. And I think once you do that, it becomes a lot easier. So,
The thing is, we've been using it for a year now.
yeah.
But when we first came to it, it did also feel to us like we'd turned up to work by mistake in our pajamas.
Yeah, it was a little bit overwhelming. So I think what really helps, and you kind of switched me onto this, is understanding some key terminology, and then it all kind of falls into place. So, and this existed in Universal Analytics, we just didn't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
So let's do dimensions and metrics first.
Yes.
Tell us what a dimension is.
So
Or give it a go.
A dimension is a thing.
That describes the thing.
Describes a thing.
Yeah.
A thing that describes a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
a dimension.
So, for example, you would have your key channel groupings. Okay.
That's a dimension.
Yeah. And then the values of that dimension would be organic, direct, social, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. So social is not a dimension. It's a value of
A dimension.
the
Yeah,
dimension,
absolutely. That's
which
right.
is-
Yeah, exactly. So you've got these dimensions, and then you have values of those dimensions, and we're seeing like that stuff. Then you've got the metrics, and the metrics are basically
numbers,
Yeah.
measurements of things. Although they don't, it is interesting. Like you can switch these things around. So like you can do like a custom report where you'll say, okay, we've created a custom report. We've got some custom code in there, and we're going to measure how much of a percentage do people scroll down the page. Right, that's a customization that you can put into to GA4. In that case, your dimension, like the labels for that dimension would be numbers.
like 25, 50, 75.
So it can be
they're the
looking-
value of the
but
dimension.
generally, if it's like if it's a label of something, like if it's the name of a thing, then it's a dimension.
Okay, so we've got dimension metrics, and then we've got segments.
Yeah.
The segments are pretty straightforward. It's kind of groupings.
Yeah, you
Okay.
group different groups of information together so you can compare and contrast.
Yeah, exactly. So, you could go through and say, I want all my people that have purchased. That would be a customer segment.
Yeah.
But you could go through and compare visitors on mobile versus visitors on desktop. They could be segments as well.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got our dimensions, we've got our metrics, we've got our segments.
Yeah. And all of that was in
Yeah, it was already
Universal
existed.
Analytics.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
just wasn't as important because we didn't have the level of customization.
and you really have to think about dimensions metrics really when you're creating the customization reports. And you need to get your ducks in a row, get your head around that first.
Yeah.
Now, that's really, really key. There is an additional thing which GA4 brings into the frame, which is scope.
Yes.
And scope's really important, right?
This one's caught me out at the beginning.
Yeah, because you can come unstuck if you mix different types of scope. So the way I describe this to people is like the binoculars. You've got the little like dial in the middle between the two eyes, haven't you, where you can zoom in or zoom out. They're like telescopic binoculars. And it helps you focus on things close up or further away. So in GA4, you've got two key scopes that you use all the time. You've got a user scope and a session scope.
Yes.
Right. So users, we're looking at, like Louise, everything you did over a period of time. But a session scope was zoomed in on like one visit that you did and what did you do there. And it's really important that you'll see this when you're pulling out your different reports. Some of them are user scope reports and some of them are session scope.
And they quite often say user first visit.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, like, if you visit the website 3 times and you came for organic search, then you did 2 direct visits, you basically had 3 sessions, 1 organic, 2 direct sessions. But you as a user first visit are an organic visitor as far as Google's concerned.
So think about that really clearly. What sort of report am I looking at? Is it user scope or is it session
I'll tell you where I
scope?
got caught out. So I combined that with segments. So I was trying to look at, I told you this before, mobile visitors versus desktop visitors. And there was no overlap. And I'm going, surely some people on desktop
Doesn't
also
look
use
right.
mobile. This don't get it. Wow, that's really weird. We have got a really weird audience.
was-
And then
it's
you go,
session
oh, I'm
scope.
looking at session.
Yeah.
Well, in a session, you can only visit on a mobile
Yes.
or on a desktop. You
Yes.
can't do both.
Yes.
So you can get caught out with these things sometimes. Not helped by the fact that one of the standard templates when we look at it later on within Google's custom report builder, is a report that looks at a segment and it scopes it based on age, mobile, and desktop, and it's session based. So you have some overlap between the age, but you have no overlap between the devices. And you look at it and go, so it can be a little bit misleading. So we'll come back to that. So before we get into the explore bit of GA4, which is where you build completely custom reports, we should say the standard reports, top right, you've got the little edit pen. You can click on that and you can edit the standard reports. You can change what dimensions are available. So what you'll notice in any report is you've got a list of dimension values. There's a drop down at the top where you can actually list off different dimensions if you want to, which you don't immediately notice quite often when you go in. Essentially, you can decide which ones are available by going to the custom menu and adding. And you can add loads of things in that drop down. You can also change which metrics are showing up in the table. So you can select those and you can reorder those and it will reorder them in the table for you as well. You can change what charts are on that report. So I want a bar chart versus I want a donut or whatever it might be. That was a new thing to me as well. So they were pie charts, I thought, and it's a donut because it's got a hole in the middle. Okay, so there you go. That was just new to me. Everyone else seems to know this. So you can do those, but also you can add different cards, which are different selections. So you can pretty much customize. The danger with it is, it's when you go save, you've got two options: save over the standard report or create a new one. And it's really easy to go, save it over the normal one. Suddenly you have modified the core report.
And this is why
really easy.
You really need to think about who you're giving admin permissions to.
And it's not just admin permissions anymore, is it either? Because now you've got like 7 different layers of permissions. There's all these different tiers. You've got to work out, should I really be allowing Kieran to do this? Or is he going to be a liability?
The answer is will be a liability.
So you can change things. So you can save over the original, but what's probably more sensible is you go through and you save it under a new name, whatever custom report you build. And then people are like, well, where do they go? I can't work out where this report has gone.
They sort of hide themselves.
Yeah, they do. So down the bottom, if you click on to reports, at the bottom of the page, you've got a thing that says library. When you click on library, you can then go in and you can see all your menu items and what sits underneath them. Another confusing thing, you can publish and unpublish the groups. So they've literally, GA4 just released a new grouping of reports. It's all the same reports, but they've grouped them together differently. You can turn that on and off. If you, for example, haven't got the Search Console reports, you need to go into library and switch it on, and you can switch them on in there.
And if people have deleted or overwritten the standard reports, you can still get to them.
Yeah, they're still there.
They're still there, so you can still rescue them. I think one of the confusing things with this is it means that, okay, you're going to get used to how your current organization have got their setup. When you move to a different organization, it could be utterly different. And it is a bit confusing. And we've never had that level of customization before, but I'm noticing this in the multiple accounts I've got access to. People have started to make changes, have started to reorder things that make sense to them, and that's good. But when you're navigating, particularly an agency, when you're navigating between lots of these, it gets you have to engage brain constantly. Well, why is it like that? Oh yeah, that's because they're using that framework and they've reordered it around that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I keep demoing this stuff live in training courses and then go back to my analytics going, why does it look like that? And I was like, oh yeah, I was messing around with it in training calls. So it's a little bit dangerous as well. But you can go through and do that. So that's like, there's a really good level of customization in there with that.
Super good. And I think when you've got the hang of adding in, like particularly metrics.
Yeah.
Like we're so used to just having the metrics we've got. It's so easy to go in and add in the extra metrics that you can see and compare.
Like bounce rate, right? Bounce rate is available still in GA4. Kind of said it wasn't because we had engaged users. So just to, I'm sure everyone's aware, but a bounce rate that enters and exits on the same page, but there's no time involved with it. So they could be on that page for ages or a really short period, you don't know. So actually engaged users, like, well, they've been on this page for a certain period of time. So I know they've been engaged. But you can get to bounce rates still. It's just not front and center, but you can switch it on as a metric and you can still get that if that's something you still feel is useful.
I found an interesting thing, came a cropper on this one. The scroll depth report, it's not as good as you think.
No, you need to do quite a lot of setup to get what you want out of it.
Yeah. Like the default one that comes out of the box with the enhanced measurement only measures if people have scrolled more than 90% of the page.
So they've got to the bottom of the page.
They've gotten to the bottom of the page. And actually, I've seen lots of customizations where they show you the 25, the 50, the 75. Okay, that whole new ball game. You've got to set up events to fire on each
Yeah,
of
there's
those
loads. It's
points.
actually
It's a
quite
lot of work.
complicated at the
Yeah, it's
moment.
quite a lot of work. There's some really nice walkthroughs available to do it, but you have to sit down and like an hour and a half later, you'll come out with the results. Yeah.
Just where you said about you were playing around with it in training courses, is there a demo account for it like there is with Universal Analytics?
Yeah, so if you search GA4 demo account, you'll get it. The problem you're going to have is that you've got access to it. You can go and do the explore stuff that we'll talk about next, which is the kind of custom built reports. What you can't do is go through and change all of the core reports and save it, and you haven't got
don't get the
100%
full
control. You
extent.
don't
You've
get
got
full
read-only
admin control.
access. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so
read-only.
there's some stuff you can't do. So that's the kind of limitation of it. What you can do is set up. You could set up multiple accounts for your website, and you could basically have 2 different setups of the same website if you want to do, one that you play around with and one that you actually use as your core reporting. So let's move on to the Explore tab, right? And Explore tab is where you build these custom reports, and I think it's really worth understanding what's really going on, because if you don't, it'd be a bit confusing. And I'm warning you now, there is going to be a Bob the Builder analogy coming from Kieran any second now.
Can he fix it? Yes, he can.
Okay. Tell us about this Bob the Builder analogy you use.
So I don't know how global Bob the Builder is.
I looked at him reasonably,
Yeah.
but it's UK specific.
Yeah, it is a bit UK specific. So Bob the Builder is a little animated character who builds things, obviously. It's kind of a kids' TV program, very popular with the preschoolers, I believe. What I love about Bob the Builder, every episode, Bob kind of involves around, there'll be a problem that Bob needs to solve. All of his friends, who are made up of tractors and cement mixers and various other, like
Perfectly normal,
yeah. Like building devices that are, like people, have eyes and talk and stuff. All of Bob's friends assemble all of the objects that he's going to need to solve this problem on the building site, right? And that's why this analogy is relevant, right? Because a bit like Bob the Builder, you need to assemble all the bricks that Bob's going to need to build with, right? So we're going to need to, when you look at the Explore report,
there's 3 panes.
There's
right?
kind of 3 panes.
So
the far left, you've got a pane where
that's where you put your stuff. You bring it.
Well,
together.
yeah, you can pull out all the bricks, and drag them into the middle pane to organize them.
That's it.
Yeah.
So the left-hand pane is where you put the stuff you might be using, where your materials kind of go.
Yeah.
So you bring your metrics, your
everything's
segments
in there. It's like your supplies.
Yeah.
Like.
And then when you actually want to use it, you move it into the next column, and that's the stuff that's going to start visualizing. So the basic thing is, here's the stuff that we might use. Here's the stuff that we're going to use. What part of the table do I want it in? Do I want a graph? Do I want a chart? What visualization? And then the main pane is going to visualize that data for you.
Think about them like Lego bricks.
Yeah.
You just pull in the right Lego bricks in to then build in that middle pane, and it will show you the model on the right-hand pane.
Yeah, and then the other thing that gets missed a lot is that main pane, the display pane, you can have multiple tabs on it. So you can actually build out some really kind of complex, multi kind of tiered things. So you've got some standard reports. The one you start with is a blank one, and that's got kind of nothing in it. And then freeform is a blank one with just a load of stuff put into that left-hand pane for you automatically, but it's US centric. So it'll have US data and all those kind of things. So if you're anywhere other than the US, that's not always the handiest. But what you would do is go through, right, I maybe want to look at from a particular region. So I might select my country. I might go through and look at the events. I might want to look at conversion events. And I can build a table or a chart really quickly. Where in the world are my kind of events and conversions coming from? So it's really worth a play with it. You only learn this by playing with it, really.
Definitely. A bit like Lego.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's quite experimental to play around this, see what you can get. Then you go into and you've got these kind of templates that you can build. They all use the same interface. They've just got a load of settings in them already. Because in that middle pane, you can say, do I want a table? And then there's all these different types of charts that you can bring up. So we've got funnels, paths, segments, user explorer, and user lifetime. So I'll just kind of go through and kind of summarize what I found these. So funnel, the funnel as it's standard set up, the template, for 90% of people I've looked at, is useless. Because it's all set to the wrong bits of the page. So what you're basically going through is saying, right, are there a sequence of 4 or 5 steps people have to go through to complete the thing I want them to do? Or set the pages. So you go through, so you can customize it. And you go start again, it'll ask you to set those pages up and a particular conversion point. And you can just see how many people you're losing at every kind of stage of that.
And if you do that, if you build it from scratch, it's quite good.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
But it's just not great out of the box, I've tended to find. Now, little cheat for you, even before you've done this. If you just go through to the standard reports go to engagement, go to events. You can see all the events, and you'll have two events. One is form started and one is form completed. You will have a bigger number of people starting your forms that have completed your forms. That is a huge opportunity of working out why have people not started to complete those forms but not finished them. I looked at ours. It's something like 40% of people that are going through and starting the form and not completing it. So it's like, wow, we need to fix that, because that would be people are almost at the point of conversion. Why are they not doing it? So then adding maybe some screen recording software like Microsoft Clarity or something like that to watch what's happening on that particular page and starting to understand it in a bit more depth. So you don't even need a funnel to start looking at those kind of things.
I mean, it might just be looking at a long form and going,
yeah, that's
work.
it. Or they might be,
time.
it might be a problem with the form. It might be the fact that actually they're just playing with it and they're, seeing what's in there and all that kind of stuff. So it might be the first point they've seen the pricing or something else.
Another top tip, segment your reports. Because it could be that can highlight, okay, it's a problem with a particular device.
Yeah, so do it on mobile versus desktop and do that.
Yeah,
as well.
or operating system.
Yeah, great.
If you want to get really granular.
Yeah, really interesting.
But check for things like that, because very often that can highlight, oh gosh, there's definitely a problem. And then you go through to, a screen recording like Microsoft Clarity and go, oh my God, it's broken on Windows Mobile. It doesn't function the way it should do.
Yeah, so if you think about it from that point of view, all you would need to drag in then is events and then your segment. And then you could go through and filter it by form started and forms completed, and then you'll have the numbers. And then you can just keep going in and changing the device that they're on. And then you've got a really useful custom report. So it's a good example of the power of it, really. Paths are what I think in university analytics, it was User Explorer. I think it was, but it's basically, you can see the journey that people are taking. How many people land on this page? What page they go on next? What page they go on next? What page they go on next? As standard, again, the template isn't great, but you can go through and it's showing you events, and it's like session started, page view, page view, page view, page view. And it's like, that's not very helpful. So you select the drop down and you go, what's the actual page name? That would be a bit more handy. And then you can see people drilling through. But if you go start again on the top, you can go through and you can say, right, what page do you want to start on? People that land on this page, where do they go next? And you can start to understand that journey people are taking. As well.
As always with these things, it becomes a rabbit warren of crosswires.
Well, I always wonder how useful that report is, really, because I can see like the average path, but you get to a point of going, okay, so what?
Yeah, it can sometimes be helpful for unpicking things.
Yes,
but
I think you have to have a theory in the first place that you're trying to untangle before it becomes useful.
And invariably, it'll raise more questions that then you can sometimes answer with screen recording or.
Well, that's the nice thing about this custom report build is you go, right, I've got, why have I got this spike of traffic on this date? And then you can kind of go down the rabbit hole and try and untangle it as you go through as well. Segments allow you to compare segments, mobile versus desktop. But again, caveat, make sure you are looking at the right scope, i.e. is it a session scope or is it a user first visit scope? Because you'll tangle yourself up like I was before. You're comparing two things that have got no overlap as well. This next one blew my mind a little bit. So the User Explorer reports allow you anonymously to look at individual users to the website and see what they're doing, like how many events they triggered, how many pages they looked at, all that kind of stuff. Now, I mean, you said the same to me when you saw this.
I was like, wait, what? Why would they do that? No, only because there's lots of things in GA4 that I've always justified to people by saying
it's all about privacy.
It's all about privacy, yeah.
And not knowing what individuals are doing, but what people are doing.
So get this, if I've got a website with a small amount of daily traffic, if I try and run certain reports on a specific day's data, it'll show 0.
Yeah,
right? And then you go, well, that can't be right. Was the website broken? No. I run it over a week.
It shows you.
And it's showing me daily data points, but not for that individual day. And I've always taken the view, no, that's them hiding that personally identifiable information. And then you show me this blinding report that shows you what an individual user has done. I mean, it's anonymized, I guess, but it's like,
you could untangle it.
Yeah. How? Why?
Yeah. Why?
What's going on?
So what's really interesting, if you go to the real-time reports, have you seen the individual real-time? So there's a little button and it will just randomly pick one of your website visitors and show you what they're doing in real time, individually, in what country they're in, what device they're in, what pages they've looked at, what events they're triggering. So you can look at an individual kind of traveling through your website if you want to. The last one in there is the user lifetime, and that gets a bit more useful. So you can see different users and you can start to go through what's the lifetime value of that particular group. How many people, how long do they stay on the website on average? How many times they come back to the website in a month? And you can start to look at those things. I actually think if you're looking at user lifetime value, because you're doing e-commerce or you're doing subscriptions, Profitwell is actually the tool you should be using. So
Love Profit.
Oh, I do, because it's free and you plug it into Stripe or to PayPal, and it just gives you so much analysis that you wouldn't get otherwise. So yeah, you might want to go down that route. So go through, have a look at this GA4 Explore tab, build out some reports. You can save your own reports and you can then share them with other members of your team if you want to do that as well. Now, I did speak to somebody at Google, and they were basically talking about the fact that there will be a library becoming available. So you will be able to publish to the library like you used to be able to do in Universal Analytics, and you'll be able to see other people's reports and grab those and kind of do them. But the templates are a good place to start. But don't assume the templates are going to be immediately useful, because a lot of them aren't. They don't seem to have thought them through particularly well sometimes. So worth taking a look at as well. We'd love to know what you are building in GA4. We have always got GA4 courses coming up as well. So targetinternet.com/GA4, and you can see when our next course is coming up. But let us know, targetinternet.com/podcast. Let us know what you're doing, successes, tricky points, all those kind of things. Any questions you've got as well. And we'll always try and answer those. And as ever, thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Podcast.
Please subscribe for more videos like this and visit targetinternet.com for more free digital marketing resources.